Welcome, you're watching Outside Source live from the BBC. Our main focus is on the UK seeing a record number of coronavirus deaths, with nearly 1,000 reported over a 24-hour period. Prime Minister Boris Johnson remains in intensive care. Now, let's bring you up to date with some new evidence which has emerged of a link between human destruction of the natural world and pandemics just like this one, like Covid-19. So according to this major study, which was published in the Royal Society, increased contact between humans and animals is causing more outbreaks as viruses jump from animal to human, with scientists from Australia and the US finding up to 75% of human infectious diseases originally coming from animals. So probably no surprise that resilient wild animals, things like rodents, bats and primates, well, they carry the highest number of viruses. But scientists are quick to warn that we shouldn't be blaming animals for outbreaks. Instead, they point to how we humans are destroying their natural habitats through practices like hunting and farming, which is bringing us closer into contact with wildlife. Now, there are numerous theories about the origin of Covid-19. Some of them are a little bit dubious, others a little bit more believable. One theory is sticking in the public mind. This one's been quite persistent. This is that the pandemic that we're seeing started here. This is the now infamous Hunan animal market in Wuhan. It's thought that someone, patient X, was infected with a virus from an animal and then spread it locally before the rest of the world. Scientists are still trying to unravel which species that it actually came from, which is key to understanding this pandemic and finally stopping it. Chinese state media suggest that it was possibly passed from this. This creature is a pangolin. It's a scaly mammal. It looks like an anteater and it's under threat. Scientists say that smuggled pangolins were found to carry viruses closely related to Covid-19. Now, there are other theories. Another one is that it came from bats and that it was passed through an intermediary animal in the same way that SARS was. The epidemic moved from the horseshoe bat to this animal. This is a civet, before then infecting humans. Now, whatever the cause, close contact with animals is being blamed, and that is putting a spotlight on the global wildlife trade. And scientific evidence suggests that SARS-like viruses out there. We spotted this article in Scientific American, and it's on the discovery of dozens of other deadly pathogens in bat caves in China. And the article suggests that Wuhan outbreak was in fact inevitable given its popular animal markets. Well, following this is our science reporter Helen Briggs, who joins us now. So just explain to us the likelihood, with so many different theories, the likelihood of which one is true and the fact that, well, you know, we are encroaching upon animals' natural habitats as we develop out.
That's right. Well, scientists have been warning for decades, really, of the risk of viruses jumping from animals to humans, and all sorts of things linked with that: SARS, MERS, Ebola, and now Covid-19, all thought to have their origins in wild animals. And we know that this seems to be becoming more frequent. And you can go out and you can survey wild animals for viruses. So bats are known to carry a lot of viruses, but they don't actually cause any problems for bats themselves. They don't make bats sick. But if they jump to humans, then they can make humans sick. So really there's this concentration now on the idea that human health is linked with animal health and indeed the health of the environment, the health of the planet. So what scientists are saying really is this is about human behavior. It's not about animal behavior. And anything that brings humans and animals into close contact can increase the risk. So if we're destroying their habitat, encroaching on the habitat of wild animals, coming into contact with them, that can increase the risk, as can wildlife trade and these wet markets where different species of animals are put in cages and they're crammed together. And that wouldn't happen naturally. And scientists say that's a breeding ground, if you like, for viruses to jump from animals to humans.
So, Helen, why aren't these wildlife, these markets that we're seeing, like the one in Wuhan, why aren't they simply banned?
Well, a number of organisations are calling for a blanket ban. Now, China has put restrictions in place on consuming wild animals, and that's expected to become permanent later in the year. Also, signs from Vietnam about regulating trade in wild markets. So some wildlife groups are going further. They want all trade in wild animals for human consumption banned, and they want wet markets banned. But others argue that any sort of blanket ban may not be the best thing to do because it risks driving wildlife trade further underground. So they're sort of saying that you need better regulation, you also need better education and try and change cultural attitudes, because as long as people want to eat meat from wild animals, then there's going to be some sort of trade that's going to satisfy that demand. And there are signs coming from China and elsewhere that that sort of message about consumption of wild animals is starting to change.
OK, Helen, thanks so much for talking us through that. Helen Briggs, our science and environment correspondent. Her article is on our website. It's fascinating reading, so do take a look at that. Now, so far, we've been talking about viruses jumping from animals to humans, but Covid-19 is also spreading from humans back to animals and between species. New research suggesting cats are able to catch this disease from other felines, while another cat has been infected with the virus after its owner had symptoms. So vets are now recommending that we keep cats indoors throughout the lockdown. And you might remember on Monday we heard about this tiger which tested positive at a New York zoo. Well, several other tigers and a lion have also fallen ill. They are all thought to have caught it from a zoo employee who hasn't yet shown any symptoms. So is there reason to be cautious? Here's our science correspondent, Victoria Gill.
Probably the most important bit of information, especially for any concerned pet owner, is that there is absolutely no evidence that a domestic cat or a dog, that a pet could give Covid-19, transmit Covid-19 to a human owner. There are no cases where that has happened. And crucially, as well as there being no cases of that happening for SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes Covid-19, there were no cases of that happening during the SARS outbreak either. And SARS is a very similar virus, and scientists studied that entire outbreak. So they have a lot more information about how the disease is transmitted. So people shouldn't be avoiding their pets or worried about their pets infecting them by sneezing. In fact, people's pets might be particularly important to their mental health right now, while a lot of us are living in isolation and with this social distancing and stay-at-home orders in place. Now, there is some evidence that humans could transmit Covid-19 to other animals. So there have been a few cases with domestic dogs and a pet cat, and most recently of a tiger at a zoo in New York that tested positive for Covid-19, and it's thought to have been transmitted from the tiger's keeper. But crucially, those animals didn't become sick. They tested positive for the virus, but they didn't become ill, and they weren't infectious then to those humans.
Some good news. Our thanks to Victoria. I'll be back in a few minutes.